I'm going to start with the bad news. Responsive parenting is a relatively new parenting style. So unfortunately for you guys, that means I have to give you a quick history lesson. I know nobody wants a history lesson, but before you turn me off, I swear it's relevant and I'll be quick. Or you can just fast forward like 30 seconds. So let's go back 150 or so years ago when the general parenting philosophy was spare the rod, spoil the child. i.e., if you're not beating the child, then you're spoiling them. That's because we believed at the time that children were born as miniature adults, albeit more barbarian-like, and they just needed to have some morals and discipline slapped into them before they became civilized human beings like you and I. Fortunately, in the 1900s, we realized that this wasn't actually correct and that there's a little bit more to parenting if we want to raise happy, healthy, balanced young adults. What we quickly realized was that children have developmental needs, and these needs need to be met for them to mature into functioning members of society. And actually, it was neglecting these needs that was causing a lot of problems in young adults and grown-ups. So the big pendulum of parenting philosophy began to swing in the right direction. And as more research into child development occurred, it swung away from discipline and harshness into nurturing, caring, and more supportive approaches. In my opinion, this pendulum is still swinging because one minute I'm talking about commando parents and now I'm talking about being a more responsive and nurturing, attuned parent. And I think it's this back and forth of general opinion that makes parenting even more complicated than it already is. So if you want to find out your own parenting style, take the free quiz on mypeoplepatterns.com and it will give you your top 3 parenting styles. If you sign up for the emails after you get your results, I'll be able to tell you a little bit more about the free online parenting course that we're offering at My People Patterns. It is a family systems focused parenting course that is all about improving all of your relationships within your family. If you don't know me already, my name is Oliver and I'm a family systems therapist and a parent coach. And I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. And I'm actually all about finding balance between these two ends of the pendulum. We actually now have decades of research to show that the most effective form of parenting is one that can adapt and be tougher or more nurturing as your child and the situation requires. Responsive parenting is definitely more on the side of the pendulum that's all about nurturing. And it's kind of exactly what it sounds like. It's all about being attuned to your child's emotional and physical needs and responding in a way that supports their development. This means that you're aware of your child's signals and cues and you respond in a timely and appropriate manner. It means that you're emotionally available to your child and that you provide them with this safe, supportive environment in which they can grow and thrive. Here are 5 things that are involved with being a responsive parent. Number 1, you got to be present. You make time for your child, you give them your full attention. That sometimes means putting your phone down, turning the TV off and engaging with them in a really meaningful way. Sometimes that's just play or talking. Number 2, listening to your child. No, but really listening to them. So you're trying to understand their perspective, you're going to validate their feelings, you're going to let them know that you understand, and that's sometimes by asking more questions and being curious. Number 3 is about empathy. When your child is upset or distressed, you're going to respond with empathy and understanding. You're going to let them know that you're there for them and you'll support them and you understand their feelings. You're going to mark their feelings, which means that you're not going to match the intensity of their feelings, but you are going to show that you register what they're feeling. Number 4 is providing a safe and secure environment. And obviously that means physically safe, but also it means supportive and emotionally safe. So not blowing up when there's a bad decision or a behavior you don't like. And it's also about holding back on judgments and big reactions. Number 5 is about developmental needs. So part of being responsive is knowing what stage of development your child is at. So I work with a lot of families with teenagers, and I know one of those things is that teenagers will naturally want to spend more time with their friends than family. And perhaps younger kids, we know that 2-year-olds are going to say no a lot. We understand roughly where they are and what their needs are and what their temperament is going to be like depending on their age. This idea of being responsive to your child's need is actually instinctual, and this was written about in the 1950s by Donald Winnicott. This is a really famous psychoanalyst who noticed that a mother of a newborn baby often has this intense focus on the infant during their early stages of development. And there's this real psychological shift that occurs as the mum becomes super attuned to the infant's needs and experiences. He proposed that this focus on the infant is a necessary part of early development, and it actually allows the mum to create the secure environment, secure attachment in which the infant grows and thrives and matures. And if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, this makes a lot of sense because human babies are utterly defenseless and we kind of need someone to be obsessively attuned to us if we have any chance of surviving in this big bad world. Interesting side note, what I find fascinating about primary maternal preoccupation is that mothers often don't recall this state of mind. It's almost like it happens on a super unconscious instinctual level. So ask a mom who's got a newborn if she can relate to this. She'll probably say yes. 6 months later, she'll have no idea what you're talking about. True story. At roughly the same time that Winnicott was thinking about primary maternal preoccupation, Diana Baumrind, a developmental psychologist, was conducting research on parenting styles, which followed on from the work of Earl Schaeffer. Independently of each other, Winnicott and Baumrind came to the same conclusions about this idea of attunement. But it was Diana Baumrind who introduced the term responsiveness to describe the warmth, support, and sensitivity that parents show their children. Responsiveness, much like primary maternal preoccupation, involves being attuned to a child's emotional needs, providing emotional support, being available to listen, and engaging with a child. Now, she created this scale of responsiveness that measured the degree to which a parent is warm, sensitive, responsive, etc. The scale came along with a bunch of questions that asked parents to scale how much they relate to statements like, I'm affectionate with my child, or I try to understand my child's feelings, or I'm available when my child needs me. So parents who scored highly in this scale are considered to be highly responsive, while those with lower scores, less responsive. Makes sense. What a lot of people don't know is that her responsiveness scale combined two important factors of Earl Schaeffer's work, and he identified these two factors. One is warmth, that's the need for parents to provide and express warm, loving, yummy feelings, and acceptance, which is the general need we have as kids for our parents to accept us and not reject us, as well as to accept us as who we are on the insides, our feelings, our interests, and a general sense of self. Baumrind's scale has been used in numerous studies to assess the relationship between parent responsiveness and child outcomes, and no surprises here. The results are consistently correlated that children who have highly responsive parents tend to have better emotional and social outcomes than those with less responsive parents. So it is important. Therefore, one could conclude that being responsive to your child's needs is crucial to their overall development and well-being. But Baumrind was also into this idea of the pendulum swinging and the idea of balance between discipline and warmth. See, I told you that history lesson was important. In addition to her scale of responsiveness, she created another scale called demandingness. This measures the degree to which parents set expectations, rules, and standards for their children's behavior. The scale, again, had questions going with it, and parents have to agree or disagree with statements like, I have clear rules for my child's behavior. I expect my child to obey my rules, and I discipline my child when he or they misbehave. Parents who score high on the demandingness scale are considered to be highly demanding, perhaps like the tiger parent or the intensive parent or the high achievement parent if you're watching the parent test. While those who got lower scores were considered to be less demanding, and that would be akin to maybe the jellyfish parent, perhaps a helicopter parent. So this scale of demandingness also had ideas about a parent's need to control behaviors. And although we know now that children are not actually miniature adults in a barbarian state, we do know that they need some help with their behaviors, understanding which behaviors are acceptable, which behaviors are going to get us in trouble, which behaviors are unhealthy or will put us in danger. The decades of research on this show us that yes, it's very important to be responsive to your child's needs and emotional states, but it's also important to set boundaries, expectations, and have some control of their behaviors. We're talking balance again. I work with a lot of parents and families in my private practice, and I do find myself explaining pretty often to the more responsive, nurturing type of parent that they have to have more balance, that they have to sometimes be a little bit tougher and stricter on the consequences. So if responsive parenting is all about being the good cop and demandingness is about being bad cop, the best parenting style you can be plays a little bit of both. You can't be good cop all the time. Sorry. This is incredibly challenging for some parents who just always want to be good cop or find it very hard to be bad cop. So this balance that I'm speaking of, how do you get it? So let's talk about self and other situations. We all have an internalized sense of self, which helps us remember who we are, gives us our sense of identity, very useful thing. And when it comes to our loved ones, we carry around an internalized sense of them too, and I call that other. Now, this is very convenient for us as a species because it allows us to remember our relationships when the other person isn't around. I remember to buy my dog treats when I'm at the grocery store because I carry around an internalized version of my dog, Other, who I can think about and can reflect on him wanting some delicious bacon treats when I spot them at the grocery store. In terms of primary preoccupation, it looks a little different. We might depict that as having a larger other. And that's because the preoccupation of the baby is taking up a lot of our mind, a lot of our thoughts, and a lot of our energy. So this is great for newborn babies and survival. But as the child gets older, we want them to be a little bit more separate from us and a little more balanced in size. When self and other are separate, it gives us pause to be able to reflect on what's going on with the other. So here's an example, only slightly exaggerated, sadly. My dog is an adorable rescue pit bull mix who is the most loving, kind animal I could have hoped for. And I do not think he's got a bad bone in his body. So when he suddenly stopped eating his rather expensive dog food, I got a little anxious. And being a good dog daddy, I reacted by grilling a piece of chicken, mixing it into the food, which obviously got eaten instantly. So I thought I was being very responsive to his needs. I was being attuned to what was going on. I didn't want to let him starve, and I wanted to make sure he was eating. Until the next night when he refused to eat his food again. And I did the same thing. And the night after that. And the night after that. Each of these nights I was grilling chicken, mixing it into the food until eventually I was on autopilot and suddenly his already expensive meals got even more expensive. And it took me an embarrassingly long amount of time and a stern talking to from my vet about his weight for me to work out that he was totally playing me. He caught on to this idea pretty quickly that if he didn't immediately eat what was put in front of him, dinner would probably get more delicious. So let's put that in terms of self and other. This is me being responsive to my dog, suddenly not eating. Other is larger because I'm worried about him and I'm concerned. And over time, I become more reactive. I immediately start grilling organic, free-range chicken to include in his already human-grade food that is shipped via FedEx from some mountain retreat in Montana. Responsiveness, left unchecked, led me to being reactive. And that means sometimes going on autopilot. And that's rarely healthy. This is an entire module on the Fortified Relationships course that we're giving away for free right now on mypeoplepatterns.com. So if you're curious about family systems theory or thoughts, feelings, self and other, sign up for this free course and you will get a little taste of how I work and what I do with families and how you can grow great relationships. So my dog doesn't eat. My responsiveness was to upgrade his dinner. But if my child refused to eat their broccoli, do I respond to their needs by just not ever giving them greens again? And what happens if my child trips over and grazes their knee in the park? Do I respond every time by rushing in to soothe them and smother them with kisses and, put a band-aid on that hurty knee? But the point I'm trying to make is that being responsive to your child's needs and being reactive to them can get very blurry. And responding in a reactive way is not always in the child or the dog's best interest. So what's the solution here? Well, the answer is called reflective parenting, which is closely related to responsive parenting, as both involve being attuned to your child's needs and emotions and responding in a sensitive and supportive manner. Reflective parenting, though, involves the parent's ability to reflect and understand their child's emotional experiences and their needs, and to respond in a way that is, empathic, supportive, but really well thought out. And that's the difference. So when I am being reflective of what is going on with my dog's dinner, I can see that I'm being played by a pit bull. I can separate out self and other a little bit, and I can realize that there's actually nothing wrong with my dog, the vet said so, and his food has enough variety, it's bloody expensive, and he ate all of it the other day. When self and other are a little bit more separate, I have the capacity to reflect on what might be going on. And I can see that he has learned that if he doesn't immediately eat his food, it gets a very fancy VIP upgrade. I can't get that reflective, though, when self and other are overlapping, or perhaps other is preoccupying me too much. I actively have to soothe my anxiety and think about him and understand what might be going on. I have to put myself in his shoes, pause. And the same is true for reflective parenting. Engaging in reflective parenting means parents are able to pause and think before they respond. And the response becomes reflective rather than instinctual or on autopilot, which is reactive. This means that we have to have the ability to not only put yourself in your child's shoes or your dog's paws, but at the same time, you've got to be able to regulate your own emotions, calm them down before you're able to respond in a totally appropriate manner. It might be a pretty safe bet to say that broccoli is universally despised by all children. So a reflective parent won't give up on serving greens to their kid because of broccoli. They might, however, pause and wonder what the child's experience of eating broccoli is. Maybe it's the texture they don't like or the flavor that's bothering their child. So they might try changing the way that it's served, or perhaps adding some flavor to it, or maybe even just another green veggie that would do the same job. Reflective parenting involves ongoing reflection as the parent considers their own emotional reactions and how that might impact their child and the decisions they make on behalf of their child. Being a reflective parent is about being a responsive parent and at the same time being mindful. We call it mentalization. So here's a quick list of 5 main principles of reflective parenting. Number 1, emotional awareness. Reflective parenting is all about being aware of your own emotional reactions and recognizing how this might impact your child or your decisions around your child. By becoming more aware of what's going on inside of you, you can become responsive in a more supportive and appropriate way. Number 2, active listening. There's a distinction that I make a lot about listening to respond and listening to hear someone. And there's a difference, because if you're rehearsing what you're going to say as the other person's speaking, you're not really listening. Collaborative problem solving is another main point. So you're going to work together with your child to solve problems and address challenges. This is all about being involved in the problem solving process rather than rushing in to fix it or offer solutions. Empathy is another big one. Reflective parenting involves being able to empathize with your child, validating their emotional, not shutting them down by offering solutions or telling them to look on the bright side. That's a big pet peeve of mine. That means that you're jumping over a negative experience if you're telling a child to look on the bright side or count their blessings. I think empathy is also about marking the distinction between their feelings and yours. So if your child is sad and crying, you don't cry as well, but you might look sad or you might frown or have a sad face on. There's a distinction between the intensity of your child's feelings and your own that marks it as separate. That's really containing, really soothing, really validating to a child. Obviously, self-reflection is a huge part of reflective parenting. So understanding your own triggers, your own biases, how your own childhood is impacting your decisions as a parent today.